Okay, so this is SimCity for the Commodore 64, and that's right. This is the first version of SimCity, which was released in the late 80s for most of the popular systems at the time: Atari ST, Amiga, PC, Mac, of course Commodore 64. This one is identified as version 1.1. I don't know if there was a version 1.0 or if this was a bug fix release. Now, the purpose of me doing this video is twofold. First, this is a rant against EA, Electronic Arts. Then I'll do some actual gameplay. So if you don't want to hear my rant, skip forward a bit. If you're not familiar with video game news, a new version of SimCity was released in March 2013, but it was probably the worst game release I've seen in quite some time. Basically, SimCity is a single-player game, but EA, or someone in their infinite wisdom, decided that it would be great to make this into an online-only game. You can't play it without an internet connection, and while playing you must be connected to the internet at all times. No internet, no SimCity for you. Somewhere in the world are a bunch of SimCity servers which save your games. If those servers are down, you can't play. Because the SimCity servers save your games, the games are not saved locally. So there's no more save and reload tricks. So if you hose your city beyond repair, you're done. There's also the DRM issue, digital rights management, which authenticates your license every time you start the game. Think about that. There are a lot of other issues with the game, like when it was initially released. For at least a week or two after, maybe even longer, I don't play it anymore. The SimCity servers were so overloaded, they were crashing and people just couldn't play the game. This is because EA did not properly scale their servers. I won't go into some of the other issues, but if you look at a place like Amazon.com, they currently have a 1.5 star rating on the game out of 5 stars, and that's pretty miserable. Now, EA, Electronic Arts, has been around since practically the beginning of the game industry. And let's look at this disc. And there's the EA logo, Electronic Arts. And this is copyright 1983. And I think EA started in 1982. That's well over 30 years. Might be the same company, but it's really not, if you know what I mean. I guess was a time in the past when you would see an EA game. It was probably chances that it was a good game. Think about something like the Bard's Tale series. They were phenomenal. Those days are gone, and it seems like EA's chosen the route to fast bucks rather than player satisfaction. They don't seem to care about player loyalty or even game longevity, which is, to me, kind of important. I want to talk about that in a moment. I guess looking back, Spore in 2008 was probably the sign of the times with their DRM release. If you look at some of the history of Spore, a lot of problems with that. And given the way things are going with EA lately, I'd be surprised if they survived another 30 years. Now, I just mentioned game longevity. I'm a retro enthusiast, and I know I'm in the minority, but I know other people like to pick up older games and play them. It's not unusual to pick up a game 10, 20, even 30 years old and play them. Look at Doom, 1993. A lot of people still play Doom. So longevity is an issue, and EA doesn't seem to care about that. Now, if there ever comes a time when EA decides it's not profitable for them to run the SimCity servers, if there ever comes a time when they decide to shut the SimCity servers down, you won't be able to play SimCity. No more SimCity. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you never know, and you have no choice. Well, there goes 60 or 80 bucks or however much you spent. But I guess if you think about it that way, maybe $80 over 10 years is not a bad deal, but that's not the point. The point is that this game is 25 years old, 1989, and it is still playable today. It'll remain playable as long as the disc remains readable. It'll remain playable long after EA has ceased to be a company, even beyond. So I got burned buying the 2013 version of SimCity, so this video is also a big fuck you to Electronic Arts. Now onto the actual game. If you've seen some of my other videos, and I just mentioned I'm a retro enthusiast, I like to play the games on the actual hardware. And since I grew up on Commodore 64, I have a natural affinity for Commodore 64. So I'm going to run this on a Commodore 64. It's a real Commodore 64, which I'll pan down and you'll see there. But first, let's look at the box. And I just noticed that this box actually says IBM PC compatible. So chances are this is not the original box. But inside this box is actually the Commodore material for the game. So I'll flip the box over. There's some screenshots of the various platforms. There's the IBM. And there's the Amiga, Color Mac, and Monochrome Mac. So I'll open this up. It's a little folder, and there's a nice Maxis logo. And I'll open up, take out all the material, and I'll take a look at some of the material that's in the box. So first we have, the most important thing is the actual disc. Commodore 64 version 1.1. Copyright 1989 by Maxis. This is a write-protected disc. There's no notch on the disc, so you would actually need a blank disc to save your cities. You can still run the game, but you can't save them on the master disc. This is the player registration card. So whoever owned this game didn't register it. Tisk tisk. This is the manual. It's kind of a thick manual. User documentation, Commodore 64 version 1.0. Here is a manual and system card correction. So this is an errata. So I guess that would be the difference between the version 1.0 and version 1.1. I know the manual and the system card says you can use any ID, but trust me, you must use this ID. This is system card. This is basic hardware requirements. Commodore 64, a disk drive, a monitor, a joystick, which I have right here. Typical Commodore Atari generic joystick. And you notice how it does not say internet connection? Even though it probably would have been impossible to connect a Commodore 64 to the internet in 1989. This says a note to parents and teachers. I didn't read this all the way. I'm kind of guessing this is the late 80s. I guess the push for educational games was still pretty strong. And this is the reference card that shows you the different menus. I don't know what this is. City Dynamics. I'm not going to pay attention to it. So that's basically what is in the box. I don't know if this is all the original material. So I will take the floppy disk, the original floppy disk, and I will put it in my Commodore 1541 disk drive. And I will turn on the monitor. And I will turn on the Commodore 64. Let me adjust the camera slightly. And you load it like any typical Commodore game. Load star, comma 8, comma 1. I did try using this, loading it under Jiffy DOS, and it made absolutely no difference one way or the other, and it takes about 2 minutes to load. So I'm going to press enter. As soon as it gets to the splash screen, I'm going to pause it and wait for it to reload, wait for it to finish loading, and then I'll be back. But SimCity, copyright 1989. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Okay, so the game is done loading and we're at the main screen. It may look a little different, but if you've played any SimCity game, most of the core elements are going to be very familiar to you. Now, the screen resolution on a Commodore 64 is, I think, 320 by 200, so screen real estate is a little bit low, so things get a little bit cramped. There's different screens. This is the main screen, and on the bottom are various stats, and I'll go through some of those. There's the road map. I don't have a city laid out. Power map, water map, city map, and so on. This is different graphs you can go into, see population, land value. This is where you can actually edit your city. And your disk access menu is where you can load, save your games. And the terrain menu. The terrain menu is actually missing in the 2013 version, where you could actually edit the terrain. I could completely clear this map and start laying out the terrain however I want. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go into edit mode. And this is a zoom up where I just saw on the main map, and I can move my screen around a little bit. And I'll try to find a small spot. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, this menu bar again should be very familiar. Bulldoze, roads, power, water, residential, commercial, industrial, your infamous RCI, parks, seaport, power plant, airport. That'll take me back to the main screen. And disaster menu. Disaster menu, fire, tornado E. I guess that's like tomato versus tomato, monster, and earthquake. I'm not going to do any disasters. First, I'm going to lay out a road, and this is your basic SimCity. Lay out your road. And there's a road, and I have to choose a power plant. Where's my power plant? There it is. And I have to lay down a power plant. I need to lay down a residential zone. I should lay out a commercial zone. And lay out an industrial zone. I'll put that up here. And that is basically it. I mean, you could lay out parks for population, happiness, seaport, power plant, airport, and so on. Go back to the main menu, and you see a small representation of my map, or of my city. And here you can go and see on the status, road map, power map. I didn't lay out any water pipes. City map, population, traffic, pollution, land value. And I didn't really read the manual. I don't know what this flashing P means, if that means no power. I don't know if I actually need to connect the zones with the power lines or just the roads. So I'm not going to go too deep into that. Go back into the main menu. You can see some graphs. There's population graph, commercial, industry, happiness, sadness, I don't know, time scale, go back, and just that is the basic game. It's real. The core game has not really changed. I must admit, the 2013 version is very nice looking. The graphics are very attractive, very easy to maneuver, nice friendly mouse menus and things like that. Of course, on a PC, lots of real estate, can zoom in and zoom out real easy. But the same gameplay still remains unchanged. Lay out your city, plan your residential zones, commercial zone, industrial zone, try not to pollute your population, and all that other fun stuff. So that's pretty much it. This is, like I said, this is SimCity version 1.1 on a Commodore 64. The game copyrighted 1989. Thanks for watching.